It was on this date, January 7th, 5 years ago, that Maya Millete disappeared from her Chula Vista home. She was planning her oldest daughter's birthday party at the time, and she vanished. Prosecutors say at the time she was also actually planning to leave her husband. Her husband, Larry, has been charged with her murder, and he is awaiting trial. He is expected to go to trial in March. So to start off, let's have this conversation. Let's get into the legal details of all of this. But first, I just interviewed Maya Millete's sister about 24 hours ago, so this is fresh sound. Let's go ahead and play a soundbite that really stood out to me.
Do you think that if Larry did what prosecutors say he did, do you think that he'll ever tell you exactly what happened?
I'm hoping. I'm praying. I'm hoping that he's gonna tell his children what could have happened to their mom. That's all I'm asking for. The kids deserve that.
And so the children now are 9, 14, and the oldest is about to turn 16 years old. So I want to get into the legal details of all of this. I've got Gretchen Von Helms. She is a legal expert. She has more than 30 years of experience. She's a criminal defense attorney. Gretchen, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know we often turn to you for your legal opinion about different cases as well as this one. So just to be clear, you're not connected to this case at all.
Correct. I'm not this person's defense attorney.
Right. You're just a legal expert, though, who has a lot of expertise. So it's been 5 years. Is this a long time for someone to wait going to trial?
Yes. Typically in murder cases, it's about 3 to 5 years. But because of the COVID situation, that continued it. So typically it's about this long because you need experts. You need to hire investigators. You need to investigate things, beyond what the prosecution has done to prepare the case. And this is a unique case because there's no body.
Right. And that is something that is it very challenging then for prosecutors to deal with that?
Yes, they know how to do it. And so they do cases without bodies. But it is very challenging because they don't have the corpse. They don't know how it died because they could test the corpse for, let's say, blood poisoning. They could test it for a drug overdose. They could test it for other things, like a beating. They could see that her jaw was broken, for example, if that had happened. But now they don't have a body, so they can't really say what happened.
And so this is one of, you could easily say, is the most anticipated trials here in San Diego County. People have been talking about this. People have joined in on the search for Maya Millete over the years, but her remains have never been found. So the sister yesterday, Mary Chris, that I spoke to, she told me she's just ready for this trial to get over with it because they want to move forward with their lives. As a defense attorney, though, when we look at the legal aspect of it, how difficult is it to prepare for a case like this?
Well, it's extremely difficult because he may or may not testify. We don't know. And so for the defense, it's actually less good for the defense case that it's taken so long.
I was going to say that. Is the 5-year thing, is that more beneficial for prosecutors or for the defense?
Correct. It's more beneficial in this particular case for prosecutors. Typically, it's more beneficial for the defense team. But for this case, because there's a body missing, if he had a case a year after she went missing, he could say, well, she took off with her boyfriend. She is, gone to the Philippines. She is, just absent. So now, though, it's really difficult after 5 years to argue that she's somewhere else. She obviously has to not be, alive anymore because she would have contacted her children. And that's what the prosecution is going to argue, is that she would have contacted her children. That's why they have all the relatives testifying, the children testifying. She was planning her little girl's birthday party, and that was very important to her. And so that's what triggered the family to call the police, because she had not had contact with them for a while, and she was always in contact with them to plan different events for her kids.
There's been so much media attention on this now for 5 years, and I know Larry's attorneys have argued to the judge, hey, let's move it out of San Diego County. He lost that argument. The judge said no. But how hard is it going to be to seat a jury in a case like this?
Well, it's going to be very difficult. So they're going to bring up a lot of jurors. So you basically want smart jurors that have lived under a rock.
Wow.
That don't have a news source, don't have the paper, don't watch TV, don't listen to podcasts. So it's got to be a jury that's intelligent, like a university professor that has their own thing going on and they just don't really pay attention to the news. Maybe they heard it, but they've formed no opinion about it.
Yeah, but do you think it's more like, because I know that the official answer whenever I ask an attorney, like, what are you looking for in a jury is always, well, we just want somebody who can be fair and can be, objective. And it's like, these are human beings. So, and it's not that I'm saying they can't be objective, but it's got to be hard. It's like there's so much information out there about this case, right?
Correct. And so, people with children that might identify with the mother you wouldn't want. You'd want to identify with people that are fathers, maybe that have had a spouse cheat on them.
Right, so you're saying the defense would want to see more men than
more
women.
men and more people that have had difficulty with their spouses. Because just because you have difficulty with a spouse doesn't mean you're going to kill that person. For example, if you're upset with her and you're putting out these hexes to try to get her back, that means he's obviously in love with her. And the argument would be then he didn't want to kill her if he was so in love with her that she took off with another man and maybe that man killed her. That would be an argument that the defense would make.
Gotcha. So the new attorneys, like the fact that he got 2 new attorneys, 2023, I believe it was, so after the preliminary hearing was over, that was also something that really set this case back because it was supposed to go to trial probably, I think, shortly after, or not shortly, but after the preliminary hearing, so within 6 months to a year, right?
Correct. Every person that's accused has the right to the defense counsel of their choice. So whether they can afford them or not is one thing, but they have a right to a defense attorney of their choice. And even if they get appointed the public defender's office and then they end up not liking that person or not being able to handle their case with that person, then they can get another appointed attorney. So it's very common for people to change lawyers. And sometimes clients change multiple times because they want to feel comfortable with the attorneys that they're working with. The first attorney we talked about was not very adequate because she was not a criminal defense attorney.
Well, and there were some very serious allegations that came out about her. It had to do with the financial aspect of the case, and allegedly she was getting money out of Larry Millete and his elderly parents and things like that, which haven't been proven as far as I know. But I mean, you're starting from scratch though, right? You're basically giving this case to a brand new set of people.
Correct.
Who have to. What do they do? As a defense attorney, do you just start from ground zero? And
you start from ground zero because the reason why the person may not have liked the other attorney would be because they did something inadequate, or they didn't investigate this person, or they didn't go and get that expert. So you want to start from scratch. You want to read everything, all the notes from the previous attorney. You want to read all the discovery in the case, and you want to see what the prosecution has, and then you want to investigate all of it. And I don't know what his defense is going to be, but you may want to have an expert, have interviewed him and be saying, this person was so in love with his wife, there's no way he would want to kill this person. Maybe he has a mental health disorder. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. And so you would want an expert that would be able to interview the person and be able to tell what his defense was, for example.
Well, and that's what's going to be really interesting is that we didn't really see much of a defense during the prelim.
You do not.
And is that typical, though?
That's typical.
Okay.
So the defense team never puts up their arguments during the preliminary examination. That is the prosecution, because it's only a small burden. Right. So the prosecution just has to put up a little, like 5 things out of the 500 they may have to show that this person most likely, it's a preponderance of the evidence. It's a very low standard to bind over for a criminal trial. So it's just about the same amount of evidence that you would need to arrest the person. So you never want to put up, as a seasoned defense attorney, unless you can win it at the prelim, you can show the judge that this case is so bogus that we should end the case now. And so we have done that a couple times on different types of cases. But on murder cases, the judges rarely dismiss it at the prelim, if ever. And so on a murder case, you don't want to put up a defense at the time of the prelim because it may change. And you may not want to alert the prosecution team as to what your defense is going to be.
Right, so you don't want to show all your cards
Correct.
right off the bat. So you have to go then through all of the discovery. And I mean, gosh, they spent a long time. I mean, because they had
Yes.
to gather all the circumstantial evidence, right?
Correct. So they interviewed probably like over 100 people. And so you have to go through all those interviews, and you have to hire an investigator to investigate all those 100 people because they might be a liar, they might be a drug addict, they might have other things that you can impeach them with to say, oh, their recollection isn't sufficient because they were taking drugs that day. For example, there might be a neighbor or a friend of May's that they interviewed that said, oh, she did this or she did that, and then they show that the person's a drug addict or what have you.
Yeah.
So they would want to investigate every single one of those people, and so that takes time.
You know, and let's talk about the prelim for a while. By the way, preliminary hearing, kind of like a mini trial, right? In case people don't know the legal terms.
Yes.
Basically, it sets the stage for before you go to trial.
Correct. It's not really a mini trial. It's just that they have to show the points of evidence just to prove sufficiently that the person should have been arrested, that this isn't a mistake, this isn't the wrong person.
Gotcha.
So it's a very low standard in the preliminary examination. So if the prosecution has like 500 pieces of evidence, they only show their 5 strongest pieces. And in that preliminary examination, they can have officers testify about what the people said. So one officer can say, I spoke to witness 1, I spoke to witness 2, I spoke to witness 10, 5, 6, 8. They can say what all the witnesses said, a brief little summary of what each witness said. And that is sufficient for a prelim.
Gotcha. So before we get too far into talking about this, let's roll a package that my colleague David Gottfredson's in. He just retired, but he did this story back in 2023 as the prelim was wrapping up. Let's watch this and let's talk about the prelim after this.
There is probable cause to believe that the offenses charged in counts 1 and 2 have been committed and that the defendant is guilty thereof.
No reaction from Larry Millete as Judge Dwayne Mooring ruled the father of 3 can be tried on murder charges in the death of his still missing wife, Maya Millete.
It is therefore ordered that the defendant be bound over for further proceedings in the Superior Court.
Prosecutors say Larry Millete murdered his wife on the evening of January 7th, 2021, the same day Maya made an appointment with a divorce attorney. They allege Larry tracked Maya's movements and hired spellcasters to hurt and incapacitate her. One of the strangest moments of the entire hearing came Wednesday morning when on cross-examination, Larry's defense attorney actually asked the DA investigator if the spells worked.
His requests of harm were documented and sent to the individual requesting their services to perform rituals to have those events come true. Yes, that's...
Did they come true?
Well...
Then came closing arguments.
The only person who had a motive, who spoke of the desire to hurt her, is the defendant.
Deputy District Attorney Christy Bowles argued there is no evidence to support the notion that Maya would abandon her kids.
May Millete did not just fall off the face of the earth. She lived for and adored her children. She would not and did not leave voluntarily.
The defense's closing argument pointed the finger back at Maya.
Mr. Millete didn't start the problem. It is Miss Millete who started the problem because of her relationship and her affair.
Defense attorney Bonita Martinez blamed Maya for the failure of the marriage and insisted no body, no murder.
He can tell you he loves his wife very much, and he did not kill her.
After the hearing, Maya's sister, Mary Chris Droulet, spoke to reporters.
This is still not the end. We need to bring our sister home. So I'm still here in the front of the camera asking the public's help. Please, with all your help, we can bring my sister back home.
Yeah, every time I hear her talk, she's just so emotional, and you can understand. I mean, it's been 5 years. She's waiting to bring her sister's body back home. Turn this down a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the trial. I mean, when I spoke to Mary Chris yesterday, she had mentioned the fact that, yes, they want to get over with this, but she's prepared for just how much is going to come out of this trial. The good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, it's going to be supposedly a 3-month trial where they're going to be combing, and getting into every detail of their lives. How much of a risk is it as a defense attorney, though, to try to go after and blame the victim?
Well, in this particular case, there's really no other defense except to say she ran off with the other man and that man may have hurt her or harmed her, because maybe she did something with that man and he just got sick of her. Who knows? That's going to be the argument, is that he didn't do it because he was so in love with her. And that's borne out by the, quote, hexes, quote, spells, because he just didn't want her to leave him. So he wanted her to fall back in love with him. Those were his first hexes. And then when she was going to go through the divorce and the separation, then he wanted her to be incapacitated so that she could stay home and he could take care of her. And so that doesn't sound like someone who wants to kill his loved one in the defense's opinion. So they would argue, as the defense attorney, that he loved her so much that he was doing these hexes / spells to keep her near him, that he would not want her to disappear and to be gone from him and the children.
But I would imagine, though, to think about the risk you're taking, though, with a jury, that you're blaming the person that may have been killed. And, whether they had an affair or not, it's like, I don't know. To me, it seems kind of like a risk, but I understand you're right, probably. I mean, I'm not sure what else they could come up with. But when it comes to defense strategy, though, are they trying to say, no, he didn't do it, she's still alive? Do you think that's the best strategy to go with? Or would it be, no, we don't know what happened to her, but, if she was killed, there are other people who could have done it. There's no bodies, so there's no real evidence that he did it. Or is it all those things?
It's all those things, correct. So when you don't have a body and when you have a relationship that was, I'll say, under duress. So a relationship is under duress, they could do all kinds of things. So the prosecution's arguing that he was the only one with the motive to want her dead. Well, that's not true. People get divorced. People separate on amicable terms. People then fight over the children. He may have said, you know what, if you have this affair, I'm going to fight and keep the children because I'm a better father. I didn't have the affair, you did. And she may have taken off because she was afraid that she would lose the children with another individual. That individual might have taken her to Mexico and then taken her to the Philippines, and then they had a soured relationship because, maybe that's her personality. I don't know. And then, she might have disappeared there. So
Because they only need one juror.
Correct.
To be convinced that there's reasonable doubt, right?
Well, yes, they need one juror, not because it's a presumption of innocence. So the jury must, and everybody must, presume that he is innocent. And it's only after overwhelming evidence, this is why it's going to take 3 months for the prosecution to do this, overwhelming evidence that he is in fact guilty. If there is jurors that have a doubt, so it's not, the defense doesn't have to prove anything. If the jurors or juror has a reasonable, not pie in the sky, a dragon came down and grabbed her, that's pie in the sky, but a reasonable doubt, hey, maybe she took off with another man. That's reasonable. And if one juror has that doubt, then they must find him not guilty. They must vote not guilty. That's the law. And so the law means that 12 people of your peers, not, judges, not prosecutors, just 12 ordinary people, all search through the evidence and all determine on whether or not there is sufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt so that no jurors have reasonable doubts. That's what the law is. And that's why this country is so great, because we have a jury system that relies on that principle that people are presumed innocent. So it would just be like, the way you want to think of it is, what if someone accused my mother of wrongdoing? There's no way she would do that because she's my mom. Your peers, that's why it's a jury of your peers. There's no way he would do that. He loved her so. And you have to overcome that presumption of innocence if you're the prosecutor to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the law.
But if you're going to go down that road and believe that, okay, well, he didn't do this, then it's like, well, then you have to be saying that, well, okay, that she's either alive or somebody else did
Right.
it.
Yeah. So you, as a juror, when you start the case, you must believe he's innocent. And you have to wait until the prosecution proves overwhelmingly beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's like clear and convincing evidence. It's beyond that. So if you need clear and convincing evidence to show that you're a bad parent before you can lose your kids, the prosecution has to prove by clear and convincing evidence that you're a bad parent. Not just a negligent parent, not a forgetful parent, but a bad parent. And so that's the rule. It's beyond that. It's above that the prosecution has to prove. So it's a very strong, and people would want that because otherwise they could grab you up like other countries and say, oh, you're guilty because I saw you and I looked at you and you just look bad and you don't look like my kind of person, and so you're guilty.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want that.
So do you think the defense, I know it was kind of hinted at during the prelim that they were, or she said she was at least, investigating some of these alleged sightings that have, or of Maya, like I think one was in Las Vegas, one was in other places where people claim they thought they saw her. Do you think the defense is going to do those things and check out all of these alleged sightings someplace?
Well, and probably the prosecution is too, because the prosecution has a duty to prove, to give you all the evidence that shows your person might be innocent. So the prosecution, if they're investigating, they go investigate those sightings, because the people don't call the defense attorney, hey, defense attorney, I think I saw Maya. Yeah. No, they call the police officers. And so the police officers have to give that evidence and testify about that evidence, that they went and they determined that it was not Maya, or it looked like Maya, and maybe the person disappeared, maybe they saw her at a roulette table. I don't know if she had a gambling issue, but if that was that she was a gambler, then the defense would want to play that up. I know nothing about her, gambling or not gambling. I mean, she had kids, so I don't think she was. Yeah. But I'm just raising that because if the defense had evidence about that and the prosecutors, police officers, or law enforcement investigated that, they'd have to turn that over to the defense attorneys. Then the defense attorneys would, go down that road and make sure that that had been investigated thoroughly.
So something that was kind of speculated after this prelim was that the fact that it lasted 2 weeks long, which most prelims are like, what, 1 or 2 days?
1 or 2 days or 2 hours.
Right. The speculation that I had heard people talk about was, are they trying to throw and put out on the table all their cards to show and scare Larry into taking a plea deal? What is your thought about that?
No, they were probably just trying to show, because there's no body and there was a discord in the marriage and there was allegations of an affair. They were trying to show, with, as you heard the prosecution argue in your clip, that she had kids and she loved her kids, and there's no way that she would not be with those kids, talk to those kids, talk to her sister, oh, hey, I'm leaving, I'm taking a trip, can you please watch the kids? I don't really trust Larry to be a good father. Whatever her issue was, and she had been talking, apparently they'd both been talking to family lawyers. Mm-hmm. And so those lawyers would kind of say, you would be a better parent. Usually it's a 50-50 split. So a judge would decide, you're both good parents, so you get the kids, 3.5 days a week, and you get the kids 3.5 days a week. So there's usually a division evenly for the kids, because they want the kids to have the love of both parents.
So let's talk about the kids then. I mean, that is one of the, one of the big questions that I have is, they were the only ones home the night this allegedly happened, where he allegedly murdered her. Will the prosecution have the kids testify?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes. The older child. The younger child was what at the time? I think
they were 4.
4. So the 4-year-old probably not.
He was the one that supposedly that went with his dad to dump her body someplace, was what the prosecutor said.
That's what the prosecutors thought.
Yes.
Again, probably the defense may call him, because the defense has a right to call people. You went with your dad and you got ice cream. I don't know. What this.
But you think they'd really put kids through this against their own father?
They can, and they have. I've had them use mothers against their children.
Oh my gosh. It's tough. I mean, I know they've already interviewed them, but it's one thing to be sitting there with a detective in a room, and another to be in a courtroom full of people and a whole bunch of cameras, I'm sure.
Well, if they like what they say. And then again, they comb through the house weeks after, and because you can tell if someone kills someone in the house, he stabs them to death, and there's blood splatter. You can't get all the blood off. And then if you Google how to clean up blood, that would be disastrous. And then if you use bleach to wipe out the blood, then there's all the bleach stuff. And
they had bleach. They said they found bleach.
Yeah, well, bleach is common in a home.
True. And you already mentioned that you think he's not going to take the witness stand. I know typically defendants don't. But potentially it could help him in this situation.
In this situation, if I were his defense attorney, I would encourage him to testify. He has no priors. So the reason that you don't want your clients to testify is because they have, problems in their life previously that you don't want the jury to know about. And if they don't testify, then the jury doesn't get to know about it. If they testify, then the prosecutor can impeach your client with those things. So they say they have a fraud conviction. So you can say, you're a fraud, you lie, you stole,
You're a liar.
Yes, exactly.
So why would we believe you?
Exactly. And so if you have a client that has a clean record, and he was military, he had a clean record, in my opinion, they would put him on the witness stand to testify about how much he loved his wife and how he used the spells to try to get her back and how he wanted her to be around for the kids and he didn't want to lose her. He was madly in love with her. He forgave her cheating on him and wanted her back. So all those things point to him wanting to testify.
So it's possible he could testify.
It's possible. It is his choice.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, even if his defense attorney say, well, I'd recommend you not testify, he can follow their recommendation, but he has the absolute choice in that matter to testify or not. That's his choice alone.
Wow, I didn't know that. And if he does, do you think that's something they would hold till the end, or do you think they do it right off the
yes,
bat?
you hold it till the end.
Why?
Because you want to have all the other witnesses set the stage. So if you say A, B, C, D, E, and your argument is F, then you'd want to put A, B, C, D in order first. And then you would put him on his F, to say this is the final say in the matter.
But then don't you run the risk, though, of the prosecution then cross-examining and something really ugly coming out, and that's the lasting memory they have?
Correct. And then you can also call a couple witnesses after to deal with what the prosecution does. Because the prosecution, since it's their burden and it's an overwhelming burden, they get to go first, you go in the middle, and then they get to go last. So they can have a rebuttal case. So they can bring on evidence, like let's say he testifies, I worked for the Navy and I had a stellar record. And let's say there was a problem with that. And so they could call a person from the Navy that said, actually, he didn't have a stellar record. He did this and this and this. So they could put a person on to rebut what the defense shows in the case.
So hypothetically speaking, like this trial, if it lasts 3 months long, that's 3 months worth of evidence that these jurors have to go through and discuss. I know nobody has a crystal ball to know how long it would take for them to come back, but you'd think it'd be a while, right, with 3 months worth of evidence?
And jurors keep meticulous notes, in my experience. So they go in and they talk about it, then they take a little preliminary vote, and if they all feel the same way, then they can go that way. And if it takes a long time to sift through the evidence, you would hope, but sometimes jurors just eyeball it.
Wow. Yeah, so on a side note, this case is one that has stayed with me for a long time. It's actually the only case where I've been covering it and I've cried on television, and it was because of the children. Like as a mom, thinking about these kids who were waiting for their mom to come home and never did. It just always gets me every single time, and I think that's part of the reason why people are so interested in this as well, is because they want some sort of closure or justice for these children and for this family. But
don't forget, the dad is also in trial. They haven't had their dad for 5 years because he's been in custody.
Right.
So not only did their mom get taken from them, but their dad got taken from them and put into custody. So her family is raising the kids. And so the issue may be that her family may have turned the kids against dad.
Well, I think that the issue, too, was that they were worried the grandparents were turning the kids against the mom's family, though, too, right?
Correct. So that's dicey with kids. So you want to raise kids up fairly, and what in a family law situation, they would say you're not supposed to speak bad about the other parent. You have to raise them both with love. You have to be cordial to each other. You have to, that's the rule of family courts when a divorce happens. And so that was ruled for the kids because they thought the grandparents would say, your mom, because she was the cheater. She was the one that had the affair. So they may have said, mommy was probably run off with the other man. That's why she's not calling you. And I don't know what was said to the kids.
Right. We don't know. That's the reality. We don't know.
We don't know.
But at the end of the day, it's like you think about these poor children who didn't ask for any of this and now don't have parents, essentially. But I will say, Mary Chris said the kids are doing well. The thing that kind of struck me, and I kind of want to leave it here, even though it's sort of on a really somber note, is we could go through this whole trial, this 3-month trial. It could be the outcome maybe they want, where he's found guilty. But it's certainly possible, and it's very possible, they still may not know where the body is. It's possible they may never find a body. And I think that's hard, because then the reality is that, do they ever really have closure then?
I would say no, but I would say also that even if there's a not guilty, let's say the jury says, I have doubt, and there's a not guilty.
Okay.
And Mr. Millete, Larry, does not know what happened. He does not know. That's a very viable alternative. And so he can never tell them, her family, her sisters, what happened, because he doesn't know.
So then, but then it's like, it's bad no matter how you look at it then, because then they're left wondering, is she still out there somewhere, or is her body somewhere? I mean, at the end of the day, like, I really got the sense from them that they just want to know where she is and bring her home, and to have that sort of chapter closed so they can move forward. But you're saying they'll likely never know either way.
Likely never know either way. So even if he is found guilty, let's say, even if that's the choice of the jury, then there's appeals, and then, and he may not know. He may be innocent and be wrongly convicted on a guilty verdict, let's say, and then it's overturned on appeal, let's say. And so that is something they'll probably never know.
Which is really sad to think about, this family being put through this whole nightmare.
Well, and there's lots of people that go missing, for example, that their friends, family, relative never know what happens to them. They may have drug addiction issues, and they may disappear into a foreign country, and they may get hurt in a foreign country. They have no ID on them. So we don't know where lots of people are. So it's a very common thing. But what's hurtful for you and for the public is that there are kids involved. And those children not knowing where their mother is, they know where their father is. They know he's separated from them. And I don't know if they get to go visit.
They don't,
And
my understanding.
And get to talk to them, because I think they have tablets now where defendants can talk to their children.
I'm pretty sure the
on
judge
tablets.
issued a no contact, because they're potentially going to be
Witnesses.
testifying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they probably have issued for her family to not speak to them about the case, because they don't want to, the judge doesn't want their memory to be clouded.
Well, I'm sure. So the trial is expected to begin in March. I'm told that's probably the last. I know that the defense kept asking for continuances, but I'm pretty sure that's the last one they got, was for it to be held in March. So it's going to be 3 months long, supposedly. I'm sure we're going to be talking to you quite a bit, especially when that trial gets underway. But thank you for taking time to chat with us today, Gretchen. And this is going to be quite the trial, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a long trial, and there's going to be lots of evidence to sort through.
Absolutely. We'll just leave it right there.
Thank you.